Artist books are not static objects. Sometimes they can open up to create expanded spaces that offer us novel or meaningful ways to engage the stories within. Let's look behind the paper walls of The Diary of a Sparrow by Kazo Watanabe and Indignity and Resistance in the Foothills of the Andes, a case study of Villa Grimaldi, Chile by María Verónica San Martin. Based in California, artist Kazuko Watanabe has been creating prints and artist books for over 35 years. Printed from labor-intensive copperplate etchings, her distinct vocabulary of shapes and marks feature throughout her work. Created by Watanabe for the Library Fellows of the National Museum of Women in the Arts, The Diary of a Sparrow is a first-person view of the rapid social and technological advances of the late 19th and early 20th centuries that radically altered daily life in Japan. The texts in this book are excerpts from her grandfather's journals. Her grandfather, Enji Watanabe, originally wrote everything in an archaic form of Japanese that would be unfamiliar to many today. Watanabe translated this for English readers. Portions from these journals are reprinted throughout the book as a light texture behind the English translations. We read the diary in a different century from when it was written, but we remain close to the source material. Enji was born in 1889. The early chapters recount his childhood, close to nature and full of simple games in a pre-industrial rural village. Each chapter is separated with one of Watanabe's vibrant prints. The sound-making box describes Enji's first exciting interactions with new technologies, like the gramophone in 1898, when he was in 3rd grade. Enji was growing up in the middle of the Meiji Restoration, a 44-year period of rapid modernization, spurred in part by the forced opening of the country to the West in the mid-1800s. Technology, education, and society were swiftly changing. As a child, he felt great hope amidst this golden age feeling of that time. The following image makes me think of a windowsill with direct sunlight brightening a previously dark room. But the shapes in the next image appear to sink downward, almost sighing. Perhaps they respond to the story before them about the Oge, an enigmatic tribe of nomads that Enji saw as a child, but who disappeared as Japan progressed further towards modernity. The next chapter describes the impacts of the Russo-Japanese War on Enji's small village. The war, fought from 1904 to 1905, marked a turning point that Enji said rushed Japan into a phenomenal period of growth. When I first pulled this page out, my body prickled with excitement to find this hidden treasure. Now the structure stands and forms something like a small house with individual rooms. When describing this structure, Watanabe said that one can gaze into it as a child gazes at a spinning globe and discovers new worlds. The signatures of Enji's translated diary flutter between the rooms. Outside of these rooms, Watanabe's etchings and her grandfather's words exist next to each other in delineated spaces. Inside, they are in close conversation. I imagine a bird's-eye view of Watanabe and her grandfather at home, sharing space and discussion about the nature of time, progress, and an individual's place in the world. The second half of Enji's diaries display his thoughtfulness and resilience in the face of intense personal and national tragedies. He describes his own anxieties and pains against an unstable period and the government's ferocious appetite for international power. The American history of World War II rarely offers the experiences and perspectives of regular people in Japan struggling through this time. I was particularly captivated by Enji's personal stories that described the everyday hardships of war and his incredibly lucky, albeit terrifying, escape from a prison cell during an air raid. Enji's final journal entry, written on the day before John F. Kennedy's assassination in 1963, looks forward and back in time. Now an old man, he looks back at the pain and disgrace of World War II, and to the state of the world at that moment, as the US and Russia engage in a nuclear arms race. Technology, society, and politics progress indifferent to a single person. With an optimism that reminds me of his earlier golden age of hope as a child, he is quick to defend the shifts of generations. If you carefully observe and compare the path by which you have come with the future path the young will take, then you will discover compassion. I say respect youth. As civilization advances, we find that nature never creates a useless thing in this world. The Diary of a Sparrow is the title Watanabe's grandfather wrote on the front of each of his journals. Sparrows are common beings, actively moving about their lives, largely unnoticed by the world. Watanabe creates a rich space to inhabit her grandfather's story, that while distinctly his, reflects everyone's lives. María Verónica San Martin is a Chilean-born, New York-based, multidisciplinary artist. Through printmaking, installation, and performance, her work explores the cultural impacts of history, memory, and trauma. Indignity and Resistance in the Foothills of the Andes, a case study of Villa Grimaldi, Chile, is an artist's book about one of the most infamous interrogation and torture centers under the authoritarian military dictator, Augusto Pinochet. 4,500 people were detained, and at least 240 people were disappeared or killed at Villa Grimaldi. This bilingual book is divided into 3 main parts. It begins with a brief introduction to the history of the Villa Grimaldi, which is now a peace park and a memorial site. Next is a registry of victims from the Villa Grimaldi, divided into 2 sections, the executed and the disappeared. I read everyone's name, some aloud and some in my head. This list names survivors, individuals who were detained at the center for as little as a few hours, or imprisoned for days or months. The final list presents the criminal regime, naming Augusto Pinochet Ugarte at the top. His high-level agents across the military follow, along with the intelligence and repression brigades at the Villa Grimaldi. At this point, Indignity and Resistance in the Foothills of the Andes dramatically changes. Page after page of simple, elegant lines suggest the Andes mountain range. But behind these serene mountains is something else entirely. 2 accordions open out. We approach the grand edifice of the Villa Grimaldi. From 1974 to 1978, under Pinochet's regime, the villa was transformed into a center of cruel abuse, brutally denying political opponents of their human rights. We go further in. Scenes of horror and torture span the pages. The ghostly figures of San Martin's gestural monoprints show us some of what happened inside Villa Grimaldi. People lay on the ground as a guard stands above them. Prisoners are blindfolded. Others are hunched in tiny boxes or cages. Horrors abound. This entire section of the book opens out to form an enclosed space. San Martin intentionally emphasized the duality of interior and exterior to mirror life under the dictatorship. Isolating the torture of the political prisoners inside, you could walk around the whole book not seeing, or not acknowledging, the brutality and injustices. In contrast to the monoprint interior, San Martin screen printed these mountains to transfer ink and glass beads onto the paper. The beads create a rough texture like sand. When I asked San Martin about this texture, she said, "I thought that the exterior aesthetic should be something peaceful, tactile, and minimalist. By adding more senses beyond the eye's ability to read, see, and absorb the history of the book, touch will immerse the reader by opening their affections and raising awareness of how the injustices occurred in Villa Grimaldi." The final section of the book presents testimonies from survivors of Villa Grimaldi. These oral histories describe the inhumane abuse from Pinochet's forces. In addition to the specific torture methods and gross injustices, these testimonies recount the prisoners' solidarity and how they survived, and their perspectives on the torturers. When I read about Pinochet's men going home to the affection of their children after their day job torturing people, the mountainous exterior is no longer serene. The texture scratches against my fingers, and I think about silence in the face of injustice. San Martin regularly shares Indignity and Resistance in the Foothills of the Andes in her moving memorials performance. Along with 12 of her other artist books, she leads the audience through silence, reflection, and dialogue to explore human rights issues and mass resistance in contemporary Chile. Indignity and Resistance in the Foothills of the Andes brings us into the brutal denials of human rights under Pinochet's regime in Chile, not that long ago in our past. The Diary of a Sparrow looks a little further back in time, offering a long view of one man's lifetime, both ordinary and remarkable. Building from first-person accounts, Watanabe and San Martin have created physical and emotional spaces for us to enter into. Looking to the past to set our sights on the future, both books offer guideposts towards peace, justice, and the significance of every person's life.